I'd like to call the commission meeting to order for April 18th, 2017. We opened the meeting at 1:30 and recessed right away to the executive session to talk about a legal issue and some real estate. And we're now closing that executive session, and we're reopening the public meeting. The first item is roll call.
The record will show that all three commissioners are present today.
Our second item is to make you aware of our committee meetings. The BIAC meets at 5 p.m. on May 11th at the ARF building, and that same day in the morning, the TAC meets at 9:30 a.m. At the ARF building. And our Marine Advisory Committee will meet in this room on May 9th at 6 p.m. And all those meetings are open to the public, and you're more than welcome to attend. The next item is our public comment period. And I see three people have signed up. The first one, and if you could come to the podium, is Brian Day. Okay, the next one is Gina Day.
I'm with him.
Okay, that makes it easy. And then Colin Middleton. If there's anyone else who didn't sign up that wants to speak, you can come to the podium as soon as Colin's done and introduce yourself, and we'll get you on the record. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. So my name is Colin Middleton. I'm treasurer of the Western Washington club called Western Community Outreach. We kind of support homeless in the community. Here talking about the low barrier shelter proposal. So I've talked with a lot of businesses last week. And a lot of them had a lot of concerns about the proposal. So the main concerns were the shelter will displace businesses, and the other concern was that it could attract more homeless to Bellingham. So I realize it's a complex issue. There's a lot of factors, but there are other options available for the businesses in the location. And the current building that they are residing in does need repair, and a larger building would be more appropriate for some of the businesses existing there anyway. They've had to turn away boats because the warehouse is too small that they currently reside in. So unfortunately, mostly the business owners that I talk to are familiar with drug users and kind of chronically homeless that are sleeping in their doorways and aren't kind of putting on a good image for Bellingham. But these are kind of the homeless people that are need the most help. So if you want to create a big change in your community, you kind of have to put a lot of energy in. Kind of looking into that. In 2012, the Health Research and Educational Trust conducted a study of over 400 homeless in New York and found that if they put in the energy and offered housing and case management to these chronically homeless, they would save, on average, over $6,000 per homeless adult, just in terms of medical spending and jail time and all that stuff. So that's a lot of savings per homeless person. And these are the people that the proposed shelter would help. The current shelter, the Lighthouse Mission, is a substance-free shelter. So these chronically homeless people that need the most help can't find help at the current shelter. And in 2016, a census conducted by the Whatcom Homeless Services Center found that 38% of the homeless in Bellingham have mental illness, 24% have physical disability, 23% have chronic illness, and 14% have substance abuse. 11% have developmental disability. So these are the chronically homeless that would be most helped by the shelter. They also found that 72% of the people that are homeless, currently homeless in Bellingham, had an address, a permanent address in Bellingham. So these are were our neighbors, and now they're on the street. So I see the shelter as kind of a step towards a solution for getting people off the street, and not addressing that would be a big negative impact for our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So we have no one else. Oh, there we go.
My name is John Lopez. I didn't really plan to speak today, but I have to address the comments this gentleman just made. As someone with homeless people in my family, I'm very sensitive to this issue, and I really support the idea of homeless shelter. But I'm also a Marine cabinet maker and a former tenant at Colony Wharf. And it seems to me that for him to make statements about what's appropriate for those businesses is maybe groundless. It seems to me that the businesses themselves should be allowed to speak to those issues. Are those places adequate for them? And the one issue that can't be argued is that those businesses need to be near the water, and a homeless shelter does not. That seems to me the bottom line. And I think that's something that all of us should keep in mind when dealing with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who didn't sign up that wants to speak? Very good. Concerning the homeless shelter, I got a memo from the mayor that wanted us to make a decision on the 18th, which is today, but I received it on Friday, and then last night she asked if we could postpone making a decision for 2 weeks. Out of the respect for the mayor, I'm in favor of holding off for 2 weeks, but we will put it on the agenda to vote either yay or nay in the port purchasing, using our option to purchase that property at our next meeting, unless either of my colleagues have something else to add or don't agree.
Nothing to add other than we will vote on it in 2 weeks. And one of the reasons was not only the mayor's request for us to do that, but also out of respect for the public opinion that we value. It's not on our action as an action item today. So we feel that it's best to do it at the next meeting, and people will have plenty of time to prepare for their yea or nay responses to what we do.
If you'll remember, at our last meeting, we asked our executive director and the staff to put together sites, and they did that, and the mayor received them. Just needs more time to look at those sites, and out of respect for her request, it will be on the next meeting that we vote one way or the other. So with that in mind, our next item is our consent agenda. Gentlemen, did you have any questions on the consent agenda? Oh, excuse me,
Commissioner,
you
I'm
need to
sorry,
read
if I
it.
may just enter a letter that you received
Oh.
that came in to address to you from the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. There's a copy for each of you.
Thank you, Diane. Could you please read the consent agenda?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through C.
Gentlemen, do you have any question on the consent agenda, or are you still reading the letter?
I'll finish reading the letter in a second. I do have a question about Dodd or John, who managed the revolving loan fund on this project?
It's John Mitchner.
John, would you take the mic, please? Thanks, John. So this is an auto body shop, and there's a little different thing for the revolving loan fund. Can you explain real quick how, and since this is on the consent agenda, we don't need to go deep, but can you
Sure.
explain real quick about how that came to be?
Yeah, actually, it's a great project. I was presenting at the Northwest Ag Business Center down in Anacortes about 2 months ago,
And the person that runs the Small Business Development Center from Skagit County approached me and he said, I actually have a client potentially for you. They have a Spanish-speaking staff down at Skagit County, so they'd been working with them. And they came to me and they said, an industrial credit union has already put $70,000 into this deal. The family themselves put over $15,000 in, and they're looking for another about 40 grand to bring it to conclusion. And would we be interested in it? And it checked all the boxes, and it's going to be a job creator and get these folks started. And 2 jobs to begin with, and their projections are looking at another 5 within another couple of years or so, and growing from there. And they are looking at opening a second shop within 5 years in addition to that. So,
Fantastic, thanks for that.
yeah, fitting a
Wish 'em luck.
need that they've identified in the community.
Super cool, appreciate that.
Yep, sure thing.
That's the only question I have.
And for people, clarification for people that are here and watching, this is not a grant program, this is we loan and they pay back.
Yes, exactly right, Commissioner. These are federal dollars. These are not state dollars that we administer on behalf of the Economic Development Administration in DC. And it is a revolving loan fund. That's exactly right. We make the loans out. We have a loan committee of folks from the private sector that meet and public sector as well. They actually make the decisions on the loans, and then we bring them forward for signatures. The money goes out into the community. It comes back in. They do pay a nominal amount of interest, and then we get them back into the community again. Yes.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Cool program. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So hearing nothing, could you please read the consent agenda again?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through C.
All those in favor?
All right,
Aye. Let the record show that passed 3-0. Our next item is a presentation on Ski to Sea. An update?
C2C, would that be on back?
Right.
Tiffany D. Simone, Meetings and Event Supervisor, and it's that time of year again when sort of the community outreach event season starts. So we do Ski to Sea, 4th of July, and then we roll into Sea Feast and Holiday Port and a bunch of other little things in between. So today I'm here to introduce the new race director, Anna Rankin. She's with Whatcom Events, and they put on Ski to Sea, and I think there may have been 3 new directors in the 3 years I've done this. So we're hoping she's going to stick around and offer a little bit of consistency. But she's here to give you an update about how that race is going, and it's a long time running. So we're hoping to continue to give it our support as it goes over many pieces of port property. So thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. So yes, I did start with Whatcom Events last year as operations assistant and have taken the full-time race director position for this year. Whatcom Events is a nonprofit organization. Besides the Ski to Sea race, we do a charity bicycle ride called the Tour de Whatcom in July and a mud obstacle course in August. Contrary to what a lot of people think, since Whatcom Events took Ski to Sea over from the Chamber of Commerce 6 years ago, we are a nonprofit. All the money does go back into the community, Boys and Girls Club, Boy Scouts, Lydia Place, a lot of different organizations that we give the profits to after we've saved a small rainy day fund to support the race. Last year, we did have a net loss of $30,000. Most of that was involved in the Ski to Sea race. The last couple of years, we've seen some of our expenses, operating expenses go up and registration come down. So really, Ski to Sea only happens with the help of 2 things: volunteers, which we use about 1,000 of for the race, and through sponsorship. We do have all of our sponsors returning this year, as well as a new gold level sponsor, backcountry.com, out of Salt Lake City. Part of that sponsorship is all of the entities that we work with, the port included, the city of Bellingham, Whatcom County. I consider, since I've been working with the organization, the port to be our biggest community partner and asset. Last year, for the first time, we used the ferry terminal for our packet pickup, and it's pretty extraordinary when there's a lot of people coming from out of town, of which there is. About 1/3 of our racers are from out of Bellingham and Whatcom County, and they're coming in for the first time, and they're picking up their packet at the ferry terminal and just seeing how beautiful it is, and the finish line area and Marine Park. Really, we couldn't do this without the Squalicum Harbor staff, the Marine Park, and the Zwanich park properties, and not just the use of the properties, but all of the crew that helps maintain the port properties and provide us with everything that we need for a successful event. We have anywhere between 2,800 and 3,200 racers on race day, and we estimate 20,000 spectators from Mount Baker all the way to Marine Park. So it is an event that brings a lot of tourism into Bellingham, and we hope that people return with that. So we do have a couple of other events besides the race. I think a common misconception is that Whatcom Events does everything with Ski to Sea. The junior parade and the junior Ski to Sea race and the Blossom Time parade are actually still handled by the Chamber of Commerce. As the nonprofit Whatcom Events, we just do the Ski to Sea race. And around that, we do a volunteer appreciation barbecue on May 21st, and that's open to the public. It's at Blodell Donovan Park from 3 to 5 p.m. And then we do the block party that Boundary Bay hosts for us. That's the Friday before the race on May 28th. And then we also do a sponsor appreciation dinner at the Upfront Theater on May 17th. And certainly, if none of you received our invite yesterday, I'd like you to contact me because we'd love to see you at that dinner. So again, I can't thank you enough for your support. Tiffany's incredible to work with, and this is our 45th year, and I am really wanting to obviously make it a success, certainly more than it was last year. As a nonprofit, we can't really have another year where we absorb a loss like that since we don't have the rainy day fund to support it. So really the event couldn't happen without, support of the port and other entities, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is an action item. If you could, please, Diane.
Authorize the executive director to increase the contingency for the All-American Marine Manufacturing Facility contract with Ram Construction by $100,000 for a total contingency amount of $643,287 and a total authorized contract amount of $9,517,000.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Gibson, Project Engineer. I'm here today to request a contingency increase of $100,000 for this project. I want to stress up front that this is not a capital budget increase that I'm requesting. It's merely an increase to the authorized contract amount. As I explained in the action memo that you received as part of your Commissioner's packet, the causes for this increase are twofold. The first factor was changes to the mechanical system that were necessary for system communication and alarm integration. This slide shows some of the equipment that's involved in that. It's a complex system that requires certain controls and functions during different seasons, manufacturing operations, and of course, emergency situations. Unfortunately, some of these factors didn't get adequately addressed during our fast-track design process. Other items were actually discontinued after the contract was awarded, so we've needed to develop some workarounds for that situation. And finally, there have been some nuanced code interpretations on the part of the city's code inspectors. They've experienced some staff turnover during the time between our permitting process and now the construction inspections. So we've been dealing with that. The second factor in this cost increase was the need to allow our tenant into the building before it was completely finished. And there were actually two factors at play here. The first is that, as you probably are aware, All-American is going to be vacating their leasehold in Fairhaven at the end of this month. And that's part of a process in which another tenant will be taking over their space in Fairhaven, and eventually the Carpenter building will be demolished as part of the Harris Avenue Pier cleanup project. So there was an urgency to get them out of that space and into their new facilities on Hilton. The other factor is that I'm happy to report All-American has secured a record number of contracts for the coming years. They're going to have a banner season with their new facility. So we applaud them for that success. It does mean that they're going to have to maintain a very aggressive production schedule, and so this was a way to allow them to achieve that. So I'm just going to show you a few snapshots of their presence in the building. This first shot is taken in the northwest corner in the office area. These are going to be outfitted with their tenant improvements, which will include restrooms, kitchen space, conference rooms, and offices. This picture shows some of those tenant improvements in process. Moving south into the shipping and receiving area, you can see some of the high pile storage racks that have already been installed. Those are tenant improvements. As you can imagine, All-American has quite a collection of equipment and tools and supplies that needs to be transferred from their Fairhaven facility into Hilton. And so getting these racks installed ahead of time facilitated that process. In that same room on the south side, this is the mezzanine storage area. Up above, they'll be able to store more of their equipment and supplies. Down below, you can see their compressor being installed in that room with the high-capacity tank up above. Behind that wall is the vacuum room and also an air dryer and the electrical panels. In the next room over, the materials processing room, highlighted in red is the CNC router. You've probably seen this equipment in operation in their current facility. It's what they use to cut their large panels so they can be used to construct the boats. Out in the main manufacturing area, this is the Bay 2 mezzanine. This is actually a mezzanine that was installed in their current Fairhaven facility. They dismantled it, did some modifications, and are in the process of reassembling it in their current facility, or their new facility. The benefit to this was that their crews could remain occupied with that work, and they could also start working on the interior of their next vessel before the building was done. This is a picture looking at what we call the Bay 1 TCO area. TCO stands for Temporary Certificate of Occupancy. And this is a permit that the city of Bellingham issued to us that allowed All-American Marine into the building on a manufacturing basis before the building was complete. We did have to meet a certain level of life safety, and it was very good to be able to work with the city as well as Ram Construction on making this possible. You can see all of the aluminum plates and structural members. This is the superstructure for a vessel that will actually be used this winter season down in Puget Sound for Argosy cruises. So they're on quite a fast track for this boat. I think early on we established that due to some weather delays and also some design changes, it was going to be necessary for All-American to take this step. And so we started to have discussions with our contractor, Ram Construction, as well as the city of Bellingham. And we realized that this was the best path forward for us. And at that time, we worked with Frank Schmeluck's office to develop a legal framework. And once that was completed, all three parties signed that, and that gave us a way to move forward under this unusual arrangement. So what I'm asking for today is just an increase in the contingency on our contract. I should note that most of the time, port contracts start with a contingency of 10%, and in this case, ours is currently at 6% of the total contract value. This requested increase would increase that to 7%. I would also like to point out that this is completely funded by the contract budget. This is not an increase outside of that budget, and it would be paid back by the terms of our lease. The staff recommendation is that the commissioners approve this contingency increase. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Thank you. Gentlemen, any questions?
Well, I had one about the things that were figured into the bid products. They're discontinued already in a matter of 4 months?
Yeah, kind of surprising, isn't it? So let me see if I've got a good picture of that. If you can look at what's highlighted in green, those are actually mislabeled in this picture. Those should be called the makeup air units.
Be what? I didn't.
Makeup air units, and they are used to bring in fresh air during the paint spraying operation. So after the boat is completely fabricated, they move it over into the northwest corner of the building there, and they draw some curtains around it and use some pretty sophisticated spraying equipment to put a coat of paint on it before it goes out. So those fans bring in supply air at the same time that the equipment in purple filters the air and exhausts it, so you have it balanced out. The city required that the equipment that's shown in blue also be interlocked with that equipment so that the sprayers couldn't be operating unless the filtration and supply air was functioning. And at the same time, the electrical code and the fire code had strict provisions as far as sequences and timing delays and how long it runs afterwards. So it was a fairly complex configuration. But to answer your question, Commissioner, those are the 2 units that were discontinued shortly after the contract was awarded.
The 2 fresh air fans.
Yes, the makeup air units.
Thank you.
And I apologize for the incorrect label on that.
Commissioner?
No, I'm getting excited to see it finished.
Good.
Down there, standing on the podium. Yay!
Comment quickly, if you know, or if Alan's here, on the schedule for the moving of the hull from Fairhaven up here and what's all that's going to entail?
Yes, thank you for asking about that. That's a good question. That's actually going to be happening this weekend. So in that picture farther down, this is the superstructure, so it's the top portion of the boat. The hull was actually too large to manufacture in Fairhaven. I'm sorry, the entire boat was too large to fit into that space. So they started the hull over there and the superstructure here. The hull is ready to be moved, and so they're actually going to bring that over this Friday. They're going to store it temporarily at our visitor dock, and then at 2 a.m. on Saturday, they will be bringing it out, the boat launch, which we have widened for them. They will store it temporarily in front of the building here, and Sunday morning, they've got a permit from the city of Bellingham to slowly creep down Rotor Avenue with that. So I think Adam and I are going to come witness that. It's going to be quite the Cape Canaveral show. Hopefully some of you can at least see pictures of it.
So the loft closes about 2, so that's about perfect timing, right?
Right.
We'll be able to see it by then.
Very good. Any other questions? What was the original contingency on this $10 million project?
Around $543,000.
What percent? Well, that would have been.
Around 6%.
6%, so it just took it to 7.
It increases it by 1%.
It's paid back now, okay. Well, hearing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Let the record, thank you. Let the record show that passes 3-0. So action item number 2, if you could please, Diane.
A motion by the Port Commission approving the water-reliant commercial marine rental policy.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. We are delighted to be in front of you here today with this water-reliant commercial marine rental policy. You may recall about a year ago at this time, your direction to the real estate staff was to deliver to you a marine trades rental policy. And you asked us to do that on or before May 1st. So while we're up against May 1st, we're here to deliver that policy to you. And we are able to do that based on the good work of the Working Waterfront Coalition, who really are the shining stars in the development of this policy. And I want to just take a second to introduce those that were at the table with Brady and I as we developed every single word of this policy that is in front of you today. And then after I introduced the folks that were at the table, we've been doing this for 4 months, every other week for 2 to 3 hours. We've spent a lot of time at it. There's been a lot of energy put into it. The Working Waterfront Coalition pushed back on occasion, but they were very respectful. They were very thoughtful, and they brought a tremendous amount to the table. So I cannot tell you how much the staff really appreciated their work. So we have about 5 slides to show to you today. Staff is recommending approval of the policy. Brady and I will go through the slides. Jim Kyle will speak on behalf of the Working Waterfront Coalition, and Jay Bornstein will also speak on behalf of the coalition. But I want to introduce the 4 people at the table. These are your shining stars here today. Matt Harden, President of the coalition. Jim Kyle, Vice President of the Working Waterfront Coalition. Jay Bornstein, who is also a port tenant. He is on the board of directors. And then George Dyson, sitting in the corner there. Thank you so much for your help and your support. So I think next I'm going to ask Jim Kyle to come up here, followed by Jay Bornstein, and then I'll give an overview of our slide presentation, and then we will answer any questions. Both the coalition and Brady Scott and I will be here to answer any questions. So, Mr. Kyle.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Shirley. We consider you to be a champion of our working waterfronts, and we certainly appreciate your hard work on our behalf. And we thank you and also Executive Director Fix for inviting us into this process. Make no mistake, but this issue is central to the mission of the Working Waterfront Coalition, so it's been a wonderful opportunity. In February of 2013, Commissioner McCauley received an email with a question. And we all know that when the commissioner is questioned, he almost always comes up with a detailed and lengthy answer, and we appreciate that. In this case, his first reaction was, well, I'm going to have to give that some thought. And that was the end of his answer. So it was a difficult question. And here is the preamble to that question. When it comes to real estate near our harbors, if the highest bidder wins, the working waterfront gradually disappears. Look around at our country's seaports. Examples are everywhere. Marine trades, shipyards, seafood processors, and commercial fishing facilities give way to office buildings, retail malls, and condominiums. I don't mean to imply that's happening in Bellingham, partly because of your good work. We're not at that stage, I'm very happy to say. We have excellent facilities, and that's why we're here. Next, here is that question that was asked 4 years ago. Has the Bellingham Port Commission directed its real estate division to resist that long-term trend toward gentrification? If so, what tools does the real estate division have to prevent that from happening? There was no answer in early 2013, but hindsight tells us a shift in port priorities was about to get underway. To begin with, because we thought the port should be more proactive in maintaining our harbor marine business cluster, we began to form the Working Waterfront Coalition. Meanwhile, Shirley McFerrin was appointed Real Estate Director, and Commissioner Robbins was elected for the first time. Shirley began to present to the Commission individual leases that offered favorable rates to marine businesses, and you approved every one. By this time, the Working Waterfront Coalition was up and running, and with Shirley's encouragement, we began to discuss a framework to formalize a lease process that would continue to favor marine businesses. Then, after dealing with a controversial lease issue about a year ago, you commissioners asked for a draft marine business rental policy, as Shirley already mentioned. And now, after 4 years of baby steps, by passing this policy today, you can give the staff an important tool with which to support our marine trades. And the question Commissioner McCauley was asked 4 years ago will have an answer. Here are 3 reasons I think you should support the water-reliant marine business rental policy. First, the policy would reduce ambiguity and guide the Commission when leases are up for approval. Second, adoption of this policy would formalize current Commission practice, sending an important message to port staff, future commissions, and marine businesses. Third, and most important, Whatcom County's vibrant maritime sector supports 6,000 mostly living wage jobs. These jobs exist because we have harbors full of boats attracted by excellent facilities and close-by chandleries, marine trades, and tradespeople. This harbor-centered maritime cluster provides the heartbeat of our county-wide maritime sector. And so we ask each of you, commissioners, to vote yes and accept this new policy. And one further point, the best reason to vote yes is not that this policy will benefit a few marine businesses. The best reason to vote yes is that this policy will pay dividends to shareholders of the port, and that includes every citizen of Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Commissioners, Director Jay Bornstein from Working Waterfront Coalition. I'd like to applaud the port for making universal, if you pass this lease policy, something that had been done lease to lease with unknowns for a lot of businesses. So this would basically universalize the rate structures. But I'd like to speak on 2 items that I believe that this policy will have a direct impact on. And one of them is the long-term security for private development. As we rent from the port, it's often that we don't necessarily put the dollars back into our businesses. But if you have a long-term lease rate policy and you can negotiate long-term leases, we can now then start to finance our equipment, we can finance your improvements, and you'll have that security for going forward in the future. The second thing I'd like to point out is that the creation of specific incubators called clusters. Now, the clusters, I brought that up at one of the other meetings, is like businesses that all contribute to one another, that help one versus the other. For instance, Bellingham Cold Storage. Bellingham Cold Storage has many, many businesses under its roof, and in fact, it extends through all Whatcom County. And it becomes this, what we'll call the cold storage cluster. You have other clusters around that will, like for the Colony Wharf area, the C Street area, and we're even talking about that. We don't want to break that cluster up. But each one of them contribute something. And this policy is directed at those types of businesses that are water reliant. Providing this policy will provide the incentive and ability to invest in your business in the long term. I did say that, but one of the things I wanted to make sure that you understood is that there is a perceived rate adjustment that may not be considered to be retail, but I see that as the ability of the delta of that, let's say the old rate to a new rate, is the money that you would be putting back into your business. That would give you the ability to grow your business. We believe that the policy, if implemented, would provide a long-term strategy win for the businesses, a long-term strategy win for the port, and a long-term win strategy for the community. And I want to make sure that one thing that I skipped over, and that is a cluster like Bellingham Cold Storage, Colony Wharf, as they do better, their FMV, their fair market value, goes up. And therefore, I think that this policy then would enhance revenue over a longer period of time as you create like businesses and bring them together so that 1 and 1 does not make 2, it makes 3. And so you will get some form of increase just from the value of the fact is that like businesses are working together. So I urge you to pass the lease policy and create a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. Not being able to see here. There we go. Commission, one thing I did want to make sure that I was clear on, and that is it is expected that revenues will go down as a result of this policy. We expect that. It will occur over time. We'll be able to plan for it. We'll be able to measure it. And the upside is I think, and we think, the Working Waterfront Coalition, and I think that this policy will result in additional marine trades businesses on our waterfront, which will offset the revenues that we lose as a result of this policy. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Okay, so the purpose of the Port of Bellingham's water-reliant commercial marine rental policy is to provide a consistent and predictable structure for determining rents for the port's marine properties, which provides a fair rate of return for public resources, while enhancing economic development, strengthening the harbor core of the county's maritime sector, promoting marine trade development and job growth on the port's waterfront properties. This goes back to my comments earlier about recruiting additional water-reliant tenants for our property, continuing to offer attractive lease rates to commercial marine businesses in order to preserve and maximize marine trade occupancy where marine trades businesses must rely on water access. And you may remember that that last bullet was put into the real estate's goals and objectives last year and into our rental revenue standards policy. That was actually drafted with the commission as a first step for moving forward with providing attractive rates to our marine uses. So what is a water-reliant commercial marine business as defined by your little task force? So Brady's going to tell you about that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brady Scott. I'm the Marine Trades Real Estate Representative with the Port. So obviously an important part of the policy is to define what a commercial marine business is. And we can read up here that they are businesses which require access to the water, where the economics of the business use create a reliance on a waterfront location and cannot regionally be located elsewhere. This is essentially a 3-part test, where the first part is, one, you have to be a commercial marine business. As you go down the bulleted list there, commercial marine businesses are businesses that are substantially engaged in marine trade-related activities, and we're excluding government agencies and not-for-profit organizations. The second step is in regards to access to the water, and there's 2 ways in which you could meet this criteria. The first is that your business use or activity requires property that has access to the marine waters, direct access. Or the second way would be your staff of your business require frequent access to vessels moored at port facilities. So you need to meet one of those to meet the second criteria of the test. The third criteria is the economics of the business use, which means that the majority of the business profit comes out of that commercial marine business derived from the access to the water that's needed. This next slide lists examples on the left what types of businesses would likely meet the definition of a water-reliant commercial marine business. This includes things like boatyards and shipyards, boat storage companies or repair companies that require vessel haul and launch facilities, fish processing facilities that receive product over the docks, companies that own or rely upon commercial moorage for their business operations, boat sale or charter companies that have commercial moorage in the harbor, or other businesses that work on vessels moored in the harbor. On the right in the green box are businesses that would not qualify for this policy. That includes retail businesses, not-for-profit or government organizations, restaurants and other non-marine related businesses, businesses like boat sale and charter companies that do not rely upon the commercial moorage. It may be just office space only, or boat manufacturing or boat storage businesses where their products can be transported over the public roads.
Hey, Brady, before you leave that slide, it's probably a good opportunity to remind people, this is the Port of Bellingham's definition of water reliant, not the state of Washington's, and not the city of Bellingham or the county of Whatcom. This is just for port business specifically.
Yes, pursuant to this policy.
Because they aren't always the same.
Exactly, that's a good point. With that, I'll turn it back to Shirley.
And as we look through this with the Working Waterfront Coalition, we believe that over 80% of our marine trades tenants on waterfront property will indeed qualify for this program. So rent structure. I just want to remind the Commission that RCW 5308080 allows the Commission to lease its property for whatever it deems is appropriate. So while we will have this policy in place, hopefully, at the end of the day here, you will have the ability to lease property for whatever you deem is appropriate. One thing that we're going to ask you to do is allow the staff to appraise our properties a little bit differently for water-reliant businesses. Right now, a commercial marine business, we would have an appraiser go in and appraise that based on a commercial use, industrial zoning. In this case, we're specifically going to direct the appraiser to appraise the property based on a water-reliant marine use, which will ultimately drive down the appraisal. In fact, I just completed one in Blaine, and I will tell you it did drive down the appraisal a little. Okay, so that's one win for the Working Waterfront Coalition and our marine trades. The second is we're asking the Commission to consider a 10% discount, and I will tell you, staff argued for 5%, and the Coalition pushed back for 10%, and we thought at the end of the day that that was fair. For example, if you look at the green area, Harbor Mall, the rental revenue standard is $79 to $1.09 per square foot. With a 10% discount on that building, it would go to $71 to $98. And remember, every year we go out into the market and we do a market comparison study based on Class A, B, C facilities, and then we bring our rental revenue standards forward for the Commission to consider and set the rates for that particular year. Then we're going to ask you to allow us to discount that 10% within that range. So I think that's a win, too, for the Working Waterfront Coalition and the marine trades. We would also continue to charge our additional rent, common area maintenance charge. There wouldn't be any reduction on that. The port management area agreement that we have with DNR, we have to charge pursuant to state law. So the law we have to follow on any tenant that occupies property on PMA leaseholds. We have to charge our 12.84% leasehold tax. And this program doesn't pertain to terminals, moorage, or web lockers. This is specific to our leases with tenants that truly have a foot in the water. Whoops. So implementation. Not allowing me to go back. There we go. Okay, so implementation. The policy will be implemented as new leases are issued and when existing leases are renewed. What we can have is just a huge mass reduction in rents. We need to do it over time as leases are renewed. And as new leases come in. The goal is to determine the rent for all water-reliant commercial marine users in accordance with this policy, thereby providing consistency and predictability to all of our tenants. The port would determine whether the proposed use is water-reliant, and the use would have to meet the criteria of those three tests that Brady talked about. And then in the case of a lease renewal, if there's inconsistency between the lease and this policy, the lease controls, unless this policy is more favorable to our tenant. And this is something I heard you all say when I talked to you about this policy, is that, yeah, that's okay, you can leave it can be consistent with the underlying lease, but if this policy gives something better to our water-reliant tenants, then we ought to do that. So this policy reflects that. So we are here to answer any questions that you may have. I will tell you that the staff in the Working Waterfront Coalition are excited about this policy, and we are really hoping for a 3-0 vote. So we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shirley. Gentlemen.
One question. How many years to completely cover our existing leaseholders, roughly? Do you know?
Boy, it could take 20 years over time. Most leases are renegotiated every 5 years, some 10. So it will take some time to cover every lease.
Thank you.
No questions, but just a statement. So, Jim, when you sent me that email, I actually did have a long, typical response, which I erased and essentially wrote what you recall, because I thought the answer was pretty easy, and it took a lot of staff time and help from the coalition to get there. So it probably was, looking at it now, sort of an easy solution. Well, we apply the formula, right? But getting to the formula was the big challenge. I think we can all recall that 4 years ago, this conversation wasn't going to happen with the commission that we had then. But you did, I think, correctly point out that there has been some renewal in taking a look at the marine trades businesses, especially as the pressure for managing the GP redevelopment project is sort of lessened, so that allowed some staff time to pay attention to this. And I do have to applaud both of the men that sit up here with me, because without their support, then this was just a conversation between a few people that thought it was a good idea. So it's great that these two men were on board with this. Huge shout out to the coalition for the help on that. The challenge, and why I erased the answer I gave you in 2013, was this port had started managing a lot of property, and a lot of the income that the port was getting wasn't from taxes, which ports are strange. We can tax and make a profit off the property that the port owns on behalf of the public. Well, to make up a shortage of income, you got to find the money somewhere. So my initial thought was, well, we'll just lower the rates to something that everybody accepts, but there would be a loss of income. And until this was worked out, nobody really knew how much that was going to be. And I'm very thankful that we're not doing it all at once, because we do have to plan for that loss, and we still don't know what that's going to be. It's probably not significant, but we're going to have to figure out how to make it up without raising taxes, because I don't think anybody wants to go there. And I truly believe that this process over time will be beneficial for the marine trades in Whatcom County, and hopefully attract even more marine trades people to this part of our region. So I'd like to say thank you again to everybody that worked on this, especially to the two commissioners that sit up here with me, because without the support here, it was never going to happen. And we'll just see where it goes, but I think it's a very positive direction, and I appreciate all your hard work, so thanks for that.
I have two questions. One, it's not going to cost us over 10%. Would I be correct in assuming that overall?
10% on the building rent. It's very difficult to measure the appraised value until we actually have appraisals. But the appraisal that we just recently had for Blaine, it was less than 10%, a little bit less than 10%. But it's really hard to answer that question right now.
Well, when we change the way we appraise it from appraising it as any use to only marine trades, obviously it's going to go down. And my second question, with all these high-powered people on the committee, what acronym did you come up with for this? Water Reliant Commercial Marine Rental Policy. What's our acronym?
You know, that's a good question. We'll have to go back to the table on that one. Because it took us, I think, a couple of meetings to come up with what our policy was going to be called, so.
Well,
have to
thank
figure
you
that one
very
out.
much for all the hard work that everyone put in on it. I have to agree with whoever said that we're going to have probably more marine trades folks coming to town, because the sign on the door really does say, we welcome marine trades to the Port of Bellingham. So thanks for your hard work. Anything else?
I'd just like to thank everybody involved in getting this here, and Commissioner McCauley for pushing this forward. Thank you very much.
Well, I do have to follow up with one thing. Thanks for that, Bobby. When this first came up, and I asked Shirley's folks for, well, what are all the marine trades businesses that we have? And she gave me these giant 11 by 17s. And because the commission was individually deciding every single time, which we still can, you know, there may be instances where it's important to do that. The rates were all over the map, and I couldn't find any consistency in there. So I'm hoping that this also makes your job, the folks in your shop, they're a little bit easier, while at the same time sending us a message to the marine trades that we're very interested. We, of course, can't give the farm away, you know, but we're very interested in having those folks here. And so it's, I still don't know how you all came to the definitions, though, because that, for me, would have been a huge stumbling block, because some were in and some are out, and, you know, we had some conversation, well, why are they out and why are these in? So I applaud, again, the coalition for helping the port staff work through those definitions. So, anyway, thanks, guys.
Okay, no other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Yep.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, we got clap now.
Okay, we have a half-hour break unless we don't want to break.
I'd like to take
I'll take a break.
Okay?
Thank you.
We're recessed till 5:30. Convene the meeting. Before we have our public comment, Tiffany mentioned that there are some posters and Ski to See shirts that you can help yourself to, free there on the back table. And those are available to anyone that wants them.
Can I go get mine now?
Sure.
They're all extra large, so they're gonna be T-shirts for the wives.
They're all what?
They're all extra large, will be T-shirts for the wives and smaller people.
So,
Or, night shirts.
Our next item is a public comment period, and we have two people signed up. Kayla Bressler, you're first.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Kayla Shaw-Bressler. I live at 316 North Forest Street in Bellingham. I want to thank you for all the work you've had to do to consider the property issues related to the easy access shelter on Ritter Avenue. I know you have a difficult decision ahead of you as you weigh the concerns of business owners as well as the. Could you hear the first part okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. As you weigh the concerns of business owners and employees against those of the homeless in Bellingham. I know that most people support expanding shelter services for the homeless in Bellingham, but that they are not pleased, with the location that has been selected. And I think that wherever you try to site a shelter in Bellingham, you are going to face this opposition. And unfortunately, this is the last and only location that the city has identified, and that I worry that if this homeless shelter is not sited on Roeder Avenue, and if the port does not support the city's endeavors in this regard, that, we have 200 people who won't be sheltered this winter. And that's a lot of nights out in the street and out in the cold. 200 people for 90 nights this winter. That's 18,000 bed nights that this shelter would support over the course of the winter. And I think that we really need to weigh those concerns equally with those of the local business owners in the area. So I thank you for your consideration of this really difficult issue, and appreciate all the work that you're doing, and really ask you to do everything you can to support the city's efforts on the shelter. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to one thing. There seems to be a misconception that this shelter would be built immediately, and that's not the case. It would be 18 to 24 months out, unless I'm incorrect. So the statements that folks make that the people this coming winter would be in a shelter on Roeder Avenue are not correct, no matter what the port decided to do. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker to comment would be Leah Hammer.
Good evening. My name is Leah, and I am also a citizen of Bellingham. I live at 1024 13th Street. And thank you for being willing to speak with us today and listen to our opinions on this matter. I do appreciate your time. So I would like to respond to the point you just brought forward, in that, sure, we're not talking about a fix for this winter. However, at the same time, to develop the supportive housing and the long-term housing needs that we really need in Bellingham, those will take even longer. And so to not address a bleeding out of a patient by putting pressure on the wound, by saying, I'm gonna do surgery later, is not an adequate response in terms of dealing with the problem at hand. And really what we are dealing with is an emergency here. And I've seen so many children in that line waiting at Lighthouse Missions that I would love to see in the beds, and then the single adults can then be housed in these 200 beds that we're talking about. So those are particularly my concerns, and I do thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, no one else is signed up. Whoop, there's a hand up in the back. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Doug Karlberg. I live in Linden. When it comes to this homeless shelter and the option that's sitting before the port, there's probably 100 people that went through a planning process in 1986 and determined that all the land on that side of Rotor would be marine trades. Then in 2014, another 100 people got together looking into the future for Bellingham and the waterfront and the port, and came to the conclusion that that land on the other side of Rotor should remain in the marine trades. These are both facts on the record. They're both signed off by the Port of Bellingham, different commissioners, but also signed off by City Council and the mayors at the time. What is hard for me to believe is I look at that decision and I can't find any fault in it. And I've listened to all the public testimony on this meeting and the last one. It's a good decision. It's a good decision, a good long-term decision for Bellingham for that to be in the marine trades. And what's at stake here to a certain extent is bringing together 100 people to put together a plan and then keeping your word. Otherwise, what's the purpose of the plan? Or you're doubting the decision. Another 100 people who looked at this and thought about this at great length came to a decision that that belonged to marine trades. So I would encourage the port to keep its word, option the land, leave it where it is, leave it in marine trades, and honor those agreements. The city makes it sound like there is no other piece of land anywhere in the Bellingham area whatsoever that will work for the homeless shelters, and that's just not true. They laid out their criteria quite nicely in the Bellingham Herald. The Sash and Door site will work fine. It's already concreted, and if you put in a man camp there, which is probably the right kind of shelter to put in, you can have one up in a month. And that's what construction crews do. That's what they do at the school system for modular units on schools. That's what makes sense, to get the homeless inside quickly in a place that they've had a plan for 30 years that they haven't been able to develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, anyone else? Very good. We'll move on to our next item. Next item is a presentation from Tamara on our financial report for the first quarter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tamara Sobczak, Director of Finance. I've got the first quarter update for you. It's more than the financial report. It's also the updates that you've requested. But before I get started, I did have a question for the Commission. Why was the math book sad?
Why does the math look sad?
Anybody jump in here, all right?
Just as a disclaimer, she did not run this by me first.
Why is the math book?
But I do moonlight as a comedian.
Second, give me a second. Equation, let's see. Didn't balance.
Something to do with minus, but.
Ready? It had too many problems.
Oh, poor little math
thank
book.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, let's get back to business. You know I like to start with the balance sheet.
You could have just said, well, it all looks good and then sat down.
That's an option.
Did you run it by Rob?
Oh, no, I will next time, thanks. First quarter is that left-hand column, and then the same information for the end of the year is the right-hand column. Looking at the total assets, we ended the first quarter at $391 million compared to $393 million at the end of 2016. What's not included in this are the grant claims. We don't have those booked yet. They're in the process. So had we booked those, I would expect that number to be a little higher. Total liabilities were $144 million at the end of March compared to $146 at the end of 2016. The difference is there, we did make our bond payments. It kind of looks like maybe we didn't, but we also accepted a $2 million EDI loan in 2017 that we received. So those kind of offset each other. That leaves net assets, $246 million at the end of the quarter compared to $247 at the end of 2016. One thing I want to mention is it looks like we dipped a little bit, but we really didn't. When I reported to the Commission our year-end results, that net assets number was about $232 million. We recall I did not have the environmental liability adjustment yet, and we were able to write off $15.7 million in liability for the environmental work we did in 2016. So it is quite a bit better than it was before.
Looks good.
Looks good, thanks. This is that net asset trend. And I did want to mention, if you look in the CAFR, our annual reports, it's called net position. The GASB a couple years ago changed the wording, and I just can't get used to it. So net asset equals net position if you're looking at the annual report. Obviously, that's an upward trajectory because of that almost $16 million adjustment.
And just for the private sector folks, net asset would be equal to equity in almost every private
Right,
sector
owner's
company.
equity. Yeah, same thing. We like to complicate it. Where are our investments? This is the exact same makeup that was reported at year end. We didn't have any calls, any purchases, or any maturities in the first quarter. So that $15 million is the same makeup it was 3 months ago. Average yield 1.25% on those. And then the balance of our invested cash is in the LGIP, earning about 0.71%. Moving on to revenues and expenses. Our first quarter revenue netted us about, or grossed us about 7.6 million, compared to a year ago at 12.9. Not to be concerned, that blue piece there are the non-operating grants. So I like to focus on that orange section there, 5.3 million revenues in first quarter compared to 5.5 a year ago, and I'll explain why that went down in our next slides. Expenses for the first quarter total about 8 million compared to 16.5. Again, let's just focus on that orange section. 3.5 this year and 3.3 last year, so just a slight uptick. Looking at aviation, slightly higher revenues. This is a trend that we haven't seen in a little while. These are due to really a change in our pricing structure. So we're able to mitigate a little bit of the lower enplanements. So higher than budget, a little higher than previous year. Expenses, aviation's still really watching those expenses until those enplanements come back up. So we've seen lower expenses than we've budgeted. Marinas revenues were a little higher than, quite a bit higher than we budgeted, and a little higher than first quarter of 2016. And that's all due to the pleasure moorage. And I don't know if folks are getting their boat in the water a little earlier this year. I don't know what that is, but it is a little bit higher. And expenses are right at budget and a little higher than 2016. Marine terminals, this is the reason for the decrease in revenues year over year. Recall Horizon Lines and Superior Energy left in the first quarter of last year, so we didn't see those revenues this year. But as you know, we're aggressively marketing the shipping terminal, so I expect to see these revenues increase over the course of the year.
I'm going to pause right there because I'm not sure the commissioners have met our newest employee, Chris Clark. So Chris, if you could raise your hand a little bit. So
Chris, welcome aboard.
When Tamara says we're looking to raise our revenues here, this all falls on his shoulders.
Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to put you on the spot publicly. All right, moving on to real estate. Revenues were slightly under budget, but pretty close. With over 90% occupancy, this division, it's hard to see any movement. So unless we purchase another building or something, and as long as we don't decrease our occupancy, we'll see these remain pretty consistent. And their expenses are also pretty consistent year over year. Looking at overhead costs, we are a little higher in expenses than we've budgeted, yet lower than last year. This is not an indication that we'll be over budget by the end of the year. A lot of these costs are dues, memberships, subscriptions that we pay. They're front-loaded. Public priorities, this does include the waterfront district. So those revenues are right at budget, but lower than last year. But again, we are still marketing that tissue warehouse and hope to see those revenues go up. So we have been bringing to the commission any cost-saving measures that we identify. We replaced, through a capital budget line item, the parking equipment out at the airport. And this, again, was paid for with a capital budget. A byproduct of this product is, of this purchase is a complete automation of the system out there. So when it goes live next month, we'll expect to start saving about $30,000 a year in labor costs.
There's not going to be anyone in the booth anymore?
Correct.
So a robot replaced our people.
I say, that wasn't job creation.
But it's a cost-saving measure.
Let's be honest.
In one manner, yes.
Yes. So that's it for the financial portion. Are there any questions or comments so far? Need another joke, because mines are great. Good, looks good, okay. All right, this is probably my favorite slide of the evening. There were no major incidents in the first quarter of 2017.
Good job,
Yeah,
folks.
even with that big snow event we had, nothing major happened. Open claims for the port. The storm we had a year ago is still open. The repair work is in permit process, I believe, estimated by our adjuster about $667,000. For those repairs, our deductible does apply. And we did receive a preliminary partial payment from our insurance company this month of over $530,000. So when we're ready to start that project, we do have some money in the bank to pre-fund that. We have one small open claim against the port. This was due to that large snow event. A pedestrian crossing from the main terminal to the parking lot slipped and fell. It was a pretty good fall. The port's insurance carrier has been put on notice, and they are in communication with the woman that fell. Stormwater program, again, this is the exact same slide, just with different dates as our 2016 year end. Consistent attainment was achieved, samples aren't required. They will be required fourth quarter of this year, so we'll start to see them sampled out at the airport again. All training and record keeping are in compliance. Our safety report, unfortunately, we did have 2 recordable injuries. The recordable incident rate, 2.14, lost workday rate, 1.07, based on hours worked. These both were due to inattention, either to surroundings or to body position. So a key priority for the safety committee this year is situational awareness. And so we're hoping to either eliminate these types of injuries altogether or at least make them a rare occurrence.
How many people do we employ?
About 100 plus seasonals.
2 out of 100 are the only ones that had a problem? That's a pretty good rate.
It should be 0.
Well.
Could be like me, just never tell the boss.
So the last update I have is public records requests. First quarter, we did receive 40 requests, and that cost about 34 and a half hours of staff time filling those requests. In all of 2016, we had 77 requests, and 138 staff hours filled those requests. A lot of these are directed to facilities, like our bid documents, our bid tabulation records, things like that, contracts. A lot of them are related to the facilities and contracting.
How's that compare with the year, 16? There it is, okay.
Yeah, we're quite high compared to last year, but it could drop off.
As far as what the requests are for, how does that compare to last year?
I don't know that. Yeah, I didn't look at that.
I would also add that it's an election year, and while these 40 are not related to the election, these are likely related to bids, specifically to the Fairhaven project. We are going to see a record year because we always see a record year of these during an election year. Every election year it gets more and more.
So that's my update. Do you have any questions, comments, any clarification? Looks good.
I'm good, yeah.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next presentation is on the Waterfront District update.
Commissioners, Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. This is one of the ongoing waterfront district updates that Sylvia Goodwin and I have put together with the waterfront district team to provide the commission with ongoing updates as we make progress with our partners in the city, Western Washington University, Department of Ecology, et cetera, just to keep the commission informed on progress and get incremental direction as we make these steps as and Harcourt, of course, as we move forward on projects. So on the past few commission updates, we've focused primarily on the downtown waterfront, the kind of mixed-use area, but I just wanted to highlight before we step, and that is again going to be the primary focus of this presentation, but I did want to highlight that there are significant projects that are ongoing out throughout the waterfront district, including the marine trades area, and just coincidentally, I mean, there's a fair number of that discussion already ongoing tonight with the rental discussion, as well as John's All-American Marine update. So as you saw, there's significant progress with the All-American Marine building. The image of the vessel on the right there, that's a rendering of the one that's under construction that is going to be hauled over this weekend through the boat launch and the superstructure assembled in the new facility. So a significant amount of work there. We also have the Grand Camp is present now down in the log pond area. Logs are starting to be accumulated there for the load out soon. So progress there. iTech Energy down is underway with the upgrades to their facility. The F Street warehouse, also known as the tissue warehouse, we're actively marketing that, as Tamara mentioned. We're hoping to get tenants in there. The C Street terminal, barge ramp, and crane is constructed, under use, and is being utilized daily now. And then we have the Bellingham Shipping Terminal Stormwater Project that we're wrapping up, the first phase of that. And as we've also discussed, we're heavily marketing the BST for additional use. So I don't want to gloss over all the great work that's being done in the waterfront district as a whole. It just seems that there's a fair amount of decisions and changes and ongoing work that we tend to focus on in the downtown waterfront. But there's definitely a lot of great stuff that's happening throughout the waterfront district. So with that in mind, we are going to switch gears down to talk a little bit more on the downtown area. We'll have a brief update on the Modca cleanup work that we have underway and some few things that are coming down the road here. Just a quick note on the granary building. As you can see, it's made significant progress. The scaffolding is down throughout the majority of it. There's the new outside structures insulation has been installed on the outside with stucco and new siding, the new roofing going on. They're on the interior now working on some of the sandblasting and cleaning up the inside. And then hopefully soon they'll be working on the extension, which will be built on that last little face that you can see on that photo that has the yellow, the yellow side. We'll have an extension that's built onto that portion. A little brief update on the roads and parks, and then we'll get into a little bit of detail on some steps that we hope to implement in the coming few weeks and months that will require some action by the commission, including probably a master development agreement amendment, an interlocal amendment with the city of Bellingham, and a potential modification to the Western Crossing memorandum of understanding. And then lastly, I'm just going to wrap up that we also are working on some site safety and security issues that we'll be, just wanted to brief the commission on.
Hey, Brian, hold that slide for a second. I feel pretty confident about certain things that I can design, but art is not one of them. And it's been brought to my attention by people with an eye for this that breaking up the digester tanks individually may diminish the impact that they have on the waterfront. So I just want to throw that out there. So does the port still own those things?
The port does still own those. Okay. Yeah, this is obviously just a rendering of a concept that Harcourt put forth as part of their second project. But that's duly noted. We can make a note of that and talk through it. You know, it would have to be on a case-by-case basis, similar to the acid ball, where we went through the process with the commission to get it surplused, get it transferred over to the city. Any use of these, they are currently port property. So I think we'd have to go through a process for those. Okay. So here's our kind of summary slide that shows where some of these projects are at through different types of work that's underway. The Model Toxics Control Act, the Modca cleanup projects. As you'll note, those first two indicate that some significant work has been done and projects are complete. The Whatcom Waterway Phase 1 is complete, and the pulp and tissue mill capping project is complete. The few more things that will be coming down the road here this year, we'll start working with the Department of Ecology on the Whatcom Waterway Phase 2 planning and engineering work there. We'll work with the commission, closely with the commission on that, because that does also include the ASB. So we have to initiate that planning work and discussion. The Cornwall Avenue landfill engineering work is close to complete with work with the Department of Ecology. They'll have some public comment work process on that. And then we also have the central waterfront, which is the marine trades area. The remedial investigation and feasibility study for that will go out for public review and comment as well. So we'll have some more milestones on those projects, not large construction projects this year that I can think of, a few focused ones, but we're into the engineering, design, and planning phases for these projects. The general binding site plan is also underway. That's the document that will allow us to start making parcels and selling parcels, dedicating parks and roads to the city. We're on the very final phases of that. We submitted that application in 2016. We've worked through the process of developing that boundary, have preliminary approval from the city of Bellingham, and now we're just in the very final phases of finalizing and recording that document, which we expect to have completed next month. So once that's done, we'll be able to officially dedicate roads to the city, have easements for the parks. We'll be able to start selling parcels to Harcourt and others. So that process will allow us to actually start with the active redevelopment. And just as a note, the granary building was a project that was outside of that. That was actually a lot line adjustment, which was outside of the general binding site plan. These next two projects, actually the next three projects, are all really outside partners that are working on these. The Granary and Laurel Street project is currently under design. We're in the final phases of that, about the 90% design. The city has had a few hiccups on their permitting process, just a little more level of effort for the stormwater outfall than they had anticipated. There's a federal process with that. There's also federal money involved with this project, so there's a lot of boxes that have to be checked for their project. So that continues to be a little fluid. They currently anticipate that will go out to bid in July, and the first phase of construction of that project, which will be the section that's out in front of the granary building, will be completed by December of this year, with the remaining portion of the project completed in potentially August of 2018. The Whatcom Waterway Park is actually moving a little bit faster than that. As you know, the Central Avenue Pier gap infill between the pier and the granary building, the piling has already been installed for that. They're currently actually out to bid on the infill of that. So they've broken that project, the Whatcom Waterway Park, into a couple phases where they did the pile installation. They're now out to bid to fill the gap and actually build the superstructure on top of those pilings, as well as construct that as a pedestrian-only amenity. So that Central Avenue Pier is going to be closed for vehicle access here in the coming month, and for construction of the superstructure and transition to a pedestrian-only facility. So that work will then translate into the actual remainder of the park, which I'll have a slide showing the current design of that, which should go out to bid here this summer with construction in this year. Yeah. And then finally, the granary building and other Harcourt projects. The granary building, as I've indicated, is already underway. A lot of work being done on that. We do have the project number 2, which was a proposed waterfront residential that Commissioner McCauley was referencing with the digester tanks. We've received a project memorandum from Harcourt on that. We're working with them to refine that. And sometime this year, we anticipate permitting for that project to start.
Brian, before you get off that, will the granary and the road be finished just about the same time?
Yeah, exactly. They're coordinating very closely with that. I think the granary could potentially be done a little bit sooner than that, but there would be a very limited access. So even though sometimes it might seem like that the granary project is moving slower than we had hoped, the road access is a critical component to that. So they're working very closely, though. Harcourt representatives, the port and city representatives meet every other week to kind of talk through schedule issues.
Thank you.
But the quote completion of the granary, it's just the exterior. The TIs inside aren't done, so it's the incomplete roadway at the time is not going to hinder businesses from moving in because they still got all the TIs.
Totally completed.
No, the road should be done before the TIs, I'm imagining.
Yeah, I think I don't know the answer to that question, actually, but I think that the Harcourt is actively looking and working for tenants, and there would be tenant improvements, yeah. So that the completion of the Harcourt's work might not be lined up exactly with the roads, but they should come together with the tenant improvements as well. Yeah. So this is actually the figure of the remainder of the Whatcom Waterway Park. This is the kind of engineering. This is the planting scheme for the park. I requested the parks give me something that was a little bit decent to look at. It wasn't just an engineering drawing, but this is really one of the documents that's going to go out for bid when they do bid this project. And as you can see here, this is the Central Avenue Pier. This is the edge of the Granary building. Granary Avenue will be out on here. This is actually the sidewalk. You can see the acid ball is placed over here with this a winding path, and these are hardscape paths with large lawns and plantings and trees. A playground area in here that's kind of a natural scaped hill with a slide built into it. So some active playground, but it's not a large play structure. And then as you can see here, the remainder of this will be the new beach area that we've talked about. This is the current bulkhead. That'll be removed. This will be peeled back, and a soft bank beach will be installed in and along that area.
So that'll all be done next summer?
That'll be done this year. So this summer and fall, and I don't have the exact schedule, but yeah, that'll be done this year. Okay. They're preparing to go out to bid for that this summer.
Brian, on the, I wish I could touch this where everybody can see.
Go ahead, touch it.
Every time I touch it, it doesn't do anything. So right in the middle of the arc there, right in there, are these ADA accessible ramps? What are those?
That's a great question. I think these are stairs.
Yeah.
And I believe.
That looks like they're ramps.
There might be that ramps on either side. I do know that it should all be ADA accessible. I know that even the gap infill was designed to have stairs and ramps, both ADA accessible. So I don't know the exact answer to that how that would be accessed, but I do believe it should be ADA accessible.
What do we have for early on parking facilities for this?
Well, there'll be parking on the street, so the Granary Avenue and Laurel will have parking. But that is a good question. We do have a lot of acreage that could be potentially temporary parking. We don't have a parking scheme for any of the other structures though at this point.
So possibly some of the gravel area be turned into temporary parking?
Right.
Okay.
It's likely. So the city's underway with this park design right now. It is the beach is a joint port city ecology project, and we'll be coming forward to the commission with an interlocal agreement to fund that construction. We're working on getting bids from the contractors, and then we'll look at an interlocal agreement to help fund that. And then another document that will be coming forth to the commission for consideration is the actual park easement that has the legal language on maintenance and responsibilities.
Where the acid ball is, how close is that to the GP wharf?
The wharf is actually further down the way here, so that riprap shoreline actually extends a fair number of feet before it gets to the GP wharf. One nice amenity here that I've noticed that they've also done is that they're going to be planting that riprap with dune grass. It's not just going to be a big rock face, so it's actually going to be a really nice park. Nope.
Can you back one second? Yeah, the where it says new beach, and then we've got pre-development OHW, that's the overhead wire, I presume?
Ordinary high water mark.
Ordinary, that's why I was going to ask if that was a high water mark.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's because it's a vertical bulkhead, so it just stops there. Okay. But that's the current ordinary high water mark.
So there won't be a bulkhead other than the one back at the top of the beach. It's all going to be beached down into the water.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on the park?
The acronyms got me. I thought it was overhead wire.
Well, we were talking about overhead wires earlier. We're talking about lots of stuff. Okay, so then these next few slides kind of show some direction that we're hoping to get from the commission today on some proposed modifications that not necessarily the agreements themselves, no vote or specific agreement to vote on, but some direction to staff so that we can move forward on actually developing and finalizing these potential agreements and modifications. So this figure here shows the current master development agreement, the current park layout, and the current western crossings footprint. And the hatched area with the bold dashed line around it is the current master development agreement, or MDA area. And that's approximately 19 acres. The park footprint here in green, that's the current park layout based on the sub-area plan, including the commercial green, which is an area that would have connected downtown or would connect downtown in between two arterials, and then the waterfront, the Whatcom Waterway Park. Then outlined in red here, that's in the clear portion, is the current 6-acre Western Crossings footprint. So one of the first steps in modifying this is to accommodate the Whatcom Waterway Park design that we just looked at, as well as Harcourt's project number 2 waterfront residential project. And I've got a slide here, the next slide, that zooms in on this a little bit, but makes it a little more clear. But in the context of the overall downtown waterfront, the dark green area here, this is about 0.46 acres. That's currently in the MDA area. But the park design, as we just looked at, actually comes all the way down into this green area. So the proposal here is to remove that green area from the master development agreement and put it into the Whatcom Waterway Park area, and then square off these corners of the master development agreement, remove the 0.49 acres from the park, put that into the master development agreement, which would allow for the design and permitting of the waterfront residential area. So this is just a zoomed up area of that. You can see here the granary buildings here. This area would become park. This area would become building parcel. So an agreement that, if with commission direction, agreement would be to take that to Harcourt. We have reviewed this concept with them, and they are in favor of having a larger park in that area as well, and expanding out their building footprint just a little bit and squaring off those corners. And we would do a master development agreement that we could take to Harcourt and bring back to the commission for consideration.
In this image, where the 690 foot, those numbers are, just above that, there's a large gray rectangle.
Yep.
That is the GP Wharf?
That is the GP Wharf, correct. And this yellow line shows the approximate shoreline, the current shoreline underneath the wharf. We've actually done a survey there and worked with a local surveyor to establish the top of bank, so we know where we have enough space in between this building pad. The city's reviewed this; they're comfortable with that as well.
So if it all works out, and I'm hoping it does, then the addition of the wharf into the park area, because there's a small difference here of 0.46 and 0.49 acres. These both say 0.46, by the way. But the wharf was never considered as part of the park space originally. So it's possible to add, well over another acre if
Correct.
the wharf plan works out.
That's right. And we've talked to the parks or the city about that as well. We're working with them. I think that even if the wharf did not stay, the city was comfortable with the amount of acreage and footprint that was there, that then the wharf on top of that would be kind of a bonus public access as well. And that actually, there's this little corner here that adds that 0.03 acres. So that's in total 0.49.
Well, it would be valuable for anybody who's interested in this to weigh in, because if the wharf is removed, there's hardly any public access at all near the water along that area. With the wharf in place, then you've got access that you otherwise would never have again, because the bank would be considerably different than the wharf, the experience on top of the wharf versus the experience without it. So.
Were we considering removing the wharf? Did I miss?
Yeah, it's in the long-term plan is
Long-term
to
plan?
remove the wharf, but it's not considerably inexpensive to remove it, but it may be less expensive and provided a better outcome for Whatcom County to leave it, so.
And we've recently been discussing a lot of different options here. One of them is skinning up the wharf so it's less maintenance heavy, and that would mean not losing it from the water side, but maybe taking it out a little bit on the shoreline side, so you can see where the yellow shoreline is. If you took the wharf out a little past that and you had a skinnier wharf, there's no need to drive big trucks and forklifts on it anymore, so you can reduce your maintenance costs by making it a little skinnier.
But the plan isn't to get rid of it for walking.
Well, the original plan was to get rid of the wharf completely, but we're revisiting that with the city, and you all will have the final say on whether we keep that, because there'll be an expense associated with keeping it.
Yeah.
And that's a component of the Whatcom Waterway Phase 2 as well. So all these things kind of come together, is that in the Whatcom Waterway cleanup, it had anticipated that would be removed as part of that project. But again, like I said, we're in this phase of working with ecology. We've got new information. We've got a new land use drivers. So that can definitely be revisited, and that'll all be built into the kind of this year's worth of planning. We have to look at the condition survey of that pier, the use. It definitely doesn't need forklifts and trucks driving on there. It's overbuilt for something like that. So there's a lot that we can do with this to make it still keep it as an amenity, but reduce the footprint and the maintenance costs with it. So with that, with commission direction, we would take this proposal to Harcourt and bring back a master development agreement, if that seems okay to the commission.
Gentlemen? Do we have one more, this is kind of...
This is the first step so this is one agreement. There is a next step here that has the Western Washington master, or a memorandum of understanding that would have an amendment. So this is one that I think unless there's...
Not before us tonight.
No, there's no decisions before you, just general direction to see if we should take these to the next step.
It includes this what we're seeing now, that
Yeah,
general
this
direction
is
you want.
That's
Yeah,
right.
unless we hear otherwise, we're going to assume you're okay with the direction we're going. But if you think otherwise, please speak up and say, no, you guys are going the wrong way.
I'm
Okay.
fine with the direction the staff is going with this.
Okay.
I really think it's important to try to keep that walkway, though, that a Taylor dock type walkway, the length of that would be absolutely beautiful. And I really think to get rid of that would be tough to replace it.
Yeah, no, that's a great, we'll take that to the next step. Okay, and then this is the final slide on these kind of upcoming agreements. So assuming that reconfiguration of the park and the development pad works, the next phase is also to look and work with Western Washington University to modify the footprint of that 6 acres, which was a rectangular shape that kind of cut through here and included the board mill building. Harcourt has expressed interest in using that and redeveloping and the board mill building. So we've worked with Western Washington University, Harcourt to come up with and the city of Bellingham to come up with a reconfigured shape that might work for all the parties here. And so this proposal would be to move the Western Crossing footprint into this L-shaped 6 acres. It retains the 6 acres. We would remove this area from the park footprint, which is this kind of green triangle with the lines through it. We would be adding these dark green sections to the park's footprint, and then we would be including this blue outline which includes the board mill building into the Harcourt Master Development Agreement. That would allow Harcourt to start evaluating with more detail kind of the redevelopment plans of the board mill building. It would allow Western Crossings to work on their business development plan for their parcels, and it would give some certainty to the parks that they have the same acreage or similar acreage of waterfront parks on the downtown waterfront. There is a slight encroachment into the industrial land, which is a direction the commission wanted us to evaluate. We retained the center line of Myrtle Street, which is not going to be a street. It's just it's the former platted layout of the street. As the furthest western encroachment into the log pond, with the exception of this upper portion of this L-shaped. So trying to get all the puzzle pieces to fit together and meet everybody's wishes, we came up with something that we thought would be a good compromise. The parks actually take a small hit of acreage. The board mill building, there's going to have to be access and roads that go through there to access Western and the board mill parcel. And then there's a slight encroachment into the log pond industrial area. But we felt that this area was fairly underutilized likely due to the area next to the log pond. It's at a higher elevation than some of the surrounding log pond area, and it was probably the area that had the least impact to future industrial activities in that area. So this is a different agreement that we would be looking at moving forward on with Western Washington University. I think there's a Western Crossings Board meeting in May. We would be drafting up a memorandum of understanding that amends the agreement and reconfigures their layout to this, and then we'd bring that back to the commission for an actual vote and consideration. So if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to entertain that. Otherwise, we'd as Rob indicated, we'd move forward on that.
No, I think we discussed this before. I think that it's a pretty good compromise for all involved, I believe, and I think it moves this project. It will move this project ahead. It'll step it up, I think, as far as the time frame of getting things done. I think it's a good plan for all. And thank you for the time invested on working on it.
Thank you.
The L shape, why does the western crossing parcel not extend more closely toward the railroad track?
There's a couple reasons for that, and the one thing that I didn't touch on is, and we've reviewed this in the past a couple times. Harcourt has also proposed a larger vision plan for the whole downtown waterfront as well as the waterfront district as a whole. The port and city and Harcourt were working on moving in that direction, but there's some certain deadlines for meeting a sub-area plan amendment process, and that came and went. So we have refocused on the things that we knew, the small changes that we felt we could get accomplished that didn't require a sub-area plan amendment. But the vision plan and the potential sub-area plan amendment would include the potential for public access through this area in the future. So not that there's a large park that would extend into the log pond, but the city has indicated the desire to have a connection, which could be a trail, through this area along the railroad tracks down to the Cornwall Beach Park.
So I'm very interested in the trail because it seems like something that can happen sooner than later. We don't have to encroach into the log pond with public access, which we can't do anyway because we got to keep it off limits. But I'm noticing this cross hatching along right in there. That's sort of telling me that's BNSF's property?
That's correct.
Okay, because that's pretty much where a trail or some public access would have to go through to continue the proposed park.
That's right. So there's a lot of other considerations that we have to figure out before that park would go through, but we didn't want to, if it even would be able to, but we didn't want to configure the western footprint to preclude that.
Gotcha.
And then I've got one last slide, if there were no other questions on that one.
I have none.
Okay. And this is just, and pardon the messiness of this is actually just to show the staff level work that we're working on right now. One thing to keep in mind is that the schedule that we outlined for the Granary Avenue and the park construction would be within about a year. There's going to be public access to this area because that road's going to be constructed with sidewalks, bike lanes, et cetera, and a public park that it hasn't been for 70 years, it's been fenced off for 10. So we really do need to be thinking about site safety and security. So we anticipate that there's going to be public access soon. We didn't want to necessarily have a brand new park and a new road that says, hey, welcome to our waterfront. And by the way, you're going down a pathway of like fences with barbed wire on either side of it. So we're looking at how to secure any hazards that might be down there. There's things like the tile tanks that are currently not really secured. There's the digesters themselves. There's buildings. There's grates. There's other things that are potential hazards. We also want to maintain the aesthetics of the site. Not that it's all in one beautiful park, but we don't want to have it look like you'd never want to come down here at all. So we want to maintain that there's accessibility and aesthetics. We do want to limit access to the log pond and industrial area. So that would be something like a fence this is a clear delineation between the downtown waterfront and the log pond industrial area for the time being. We need to look at the GP Wharf just from a safety perspective, whether that would be portions that could be accessible temporarily or not. And then also anticipating that throughout time, as the build-out occurs, there is going to be temporary construction fencing, for the next 20 years as projects get developed and built out. But so we're just in the preliminary phases of looking at this with our waterfront district team. We'd probably bring a much more detailed and more firmed-up view of what we would be proposing to you in the future. But just wanted to make the commission aware that we are looking at site safety and security.
I was just chuckling at your 20-year temporary fences. It was just like a contrast. You just temporary fence for 20 years.
Well, yeah. There'll be a moving temporary fence.
Well, I was wondering, is this a draft? Is this just a draft?
Yeah,
or?
I want to be clear that this is a draft. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I think it's a good idea to get the public on that pier to see how much use it actually does and help us make a decision and what we're going to do in the future with that dock. If people can, if we can allow people on it.
Yeah, it is a unique experience. There's no doubt that it's a unique experience to get out on the water like that.
So some idea of the use how many people are interested in being on it.
4th of July, for about 3 years, people were quite interested in.
Yeah, last year we couldn't, and we have the same issues in that, the pier has got some areas that aren't real skookum and other areas that are. So for this year, Commissioner, with your input, we'd like to look at moving it. Do you see where it says assuming move to park there? Right above the digester tanks? We're talking about putting some bleachers in that area and inviting the public down into that area. Now, we have to coordinate that with the city, and they're not going to be too happy because they're going to be building streets there. But as long as we can keep everyone safe, I think we can use some hybrid solution here that gets folks down there.
Can't get them on the other side?
Possibly. It depends on the street construction. We'll get them as close as we can with the best view we can, but it really depends on the construction that's going on at the time.
Maybe a question for Frank. I know you're not a slip and fall lawyer, but I'm looking at this site right now, and a lot of folks have been asking me, why can't we go down there? And obviously, it's right now looks like a really big gravel yard. So, what's without resorting to fencing the entire thing off to sort of, CYA for the port here? How do you sort of keep people out, but maybe you don't keep people out? And what do you do without building a fence and keep the port safe from lawsuits?
Well, first of all, if people trespass on our property, let me give you the whole range. If somebody trespasses on our property in the state of Washington, we have to refrain from purposely injuring them. For example, traps or something like that. You can't put those out there, electrified things. Outside of that, they're on their own. Beyond that, if we open it up to recreational use, we're responsible for latent defects. And what does that mean? I can give you an example. There was a case involving a county that had a lake, and they cut a bunch of trees off right below the water line. The trees were going in the lake, and a water skier came by and was upended by the trees and seriously injured. That's a latent defect. In other words, the water skier would not know it's there because you can't see it. So we would have to be very careful about any latent defects here, in terms of somebody stepping in something, falling in something. And so if you were to open it to the public, you got to make sure there's no latent defects. You can warn the public. Certainly you can't charge a fee, because once you charge a fee, then the people become like on our marina tenants, business invitees or business licensees, and then we have a duty to warn or make safe. So long and short of it is, you can kind of go one of two ways. You can warn against all latent defects and allow people to come on for no fee, or you can warn and make safe and charge a fee. Those are your two choices. I think Brian has it exactly right. There's a lot of latent defects in an old industrial site. Mm-hmm. And so you would have to be very careful that people would not, and in fairness to them, not realize the danger and then hurt themselves. So that'd be the issue.
Aesthetics aside, because to secure this entire site would cost a pile of money in fencing that eventually gets torn down, or maybe barely even built and gets torn down because it's in the way and then it gets replaced. So aesthetics aside, an ecology block every 50 feet with a cable between each one, with a sign in between each one that says "keep out."
What some people use is what is commonly referred to as a freeway fence, which is a 4-strand, not barbed wire, but just a 4-strand. You see them along the freeways. They're just 4 strands. Cable, just a metal fence, and you would hang signs along there that says "no trespassing," "keep out," "danger," former industrial site or something like that, all around the property. So that if somebody has to physically cross that barrier and gets hurt, unfortunately, the port would be able to say, look, they are a trespasser, and we warned people to cross the barrier. So that's that issue that you speak of. As the issue of people coming on to the, say on the grandstands there to watch the fireworks, the port would need, and Brian and I have talked about this, to warn or make safe the route they're going to travel to get to that point, so that there's no latent defects they could hurt themselves on, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So Commissioner McCauley, are you suggesting that we put some sort of walkway to traverse through this so people can traverse through the area?
Yeah, I mean, as
I'm grasping your idea and I kind of like it.
as the site builds out, it does take some time. So the digesters, obviously, you'd have to probably enlarge that rectangle. Same with the tile tanks. In case of an earthquake, they're going to fall, significant distance. So maybe there's some thought that has to go into that, which I'm sure it will. The alcohol plant, you can secure that. The board mill, you can secure that. But aside from literally building a chain link fence at considerable expense around the entire area outlined sort of in blue here, how do you, one, not visually distract from just looking through it, but at the same time protect the public interest and not, having folks getting injured and suing the port, which could cost a considerable amount of money?
And we've actually started looking at a variety of examples of that, and we've pulled up a fair number of those that kind of informed this kind of work session where there's the former Tacoma smelter area, which is called Ruston now, Ruston Place, and they have a large mixed-use development right down
Is
there.
it Rustin?
Like O-N, Ruston.
Ruston?
Yeah. And it's got an environmental cap. It's got a large environmental cap, and then it's got a big movie theater, some residential areas, and it's built out like this. And they just have a sidewalk with a little low fence that you can see through it, and it's really kind of aesthetically okay. And there's a couple signs on it. Hey, this is an ongoing cleanup project. There's the Port of Everett's underway with their redevelopment of their marina area. It's a little different, but they have sidewalks that are accessible with slopes down to their capped area with a few signs every once in a while. And so there's lots of ways to do it, but we just wanted to let the commission know that there's definitely some areas where we're going to secure and it's going to be off limits, like the industrial area. Some things like the pump house on the wharf that we need to maintain and that is actively used. And there's some other areas where we have decisions like this to make. So we'll keep you informed as we move forward on some ideas. But there is a capital budget line item for site security, and we anticipate using some of that this year.
So commissioners, you're really talking about two different things. Where you really want to exclude everyone, you're talking about a fence around an active facility. Where you just want to prevent liability, you just need one of these, I call them freeway fences. They're 4-strand wire with signs, no trespassing, so that clearly somebody's on the property, they understand there's no trespassing. And then they're a trespasser, and the law in Washington says they're kind of on their own unless we actively tried to harm them.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
One, if you were to use the freeway-style fence, you're going to have to drive posts. Is that?
That's okay. Yep. So all that work on the now that we've had the cap done, we have a contaminated materials management plan. We have an O&M plan for the cap. We have restrictive covenants on the property on how we do those. So whether it's us or like the city with the parks, they've already started coordinating with the Department of Ecology and with us, and so there's a whole process involved with that. But yeah, there's no restrictions for that type of thing. It's just a process.
You aren't anticipating any parking in this area. It's all walk to it?
Sorry, which area was that?
Well, this fenced-in area that you're talking about.
Yeah, there would probably be parking on the street only, and then there would be, for the 4th of July?
Right.
Yeah. Rob, do you think?
Yeah, no, we've typically been successful by not allowing cars down there. Maybe volunteers can park down there, but we'd make everyone else park elsewhere.
So how soon can you move the port offices down the alcohol plant? Is
Yeah.
that still a?
The question was back in a new plan, that remains in the park area still, or?
Sylvia, the alcohol building, is that in the park area? Right now, it's in the MDA, so I guess the answer is a hybrid. It depends on when we modify the MDA, because right now it's in Harcourt's MDA.
Yeah, the alcohol plant is in Harcourt's MDA, and if we modify the plan, we might be able to fit a narrow park by the alcohol plant, or we might have to take part of the alcohol plant off to make a wider park. That has not been decided. That issue is partly why we are waiting another year to get our sub-area plan amendment. There's a lot of complicated interrelated issues.
So it was in the Western Crossing, right?
No, it's in the Harcourt MDA.
Okay.
So it's in Harcourt's management development agreement, and then we're trying to remove that out when we renegotiate their MDA.
Thank you.
Classic building.
All right.
It's the high-end rent in the future, I'm telling you.
Louis Parr really likes the building with Harcourt. He went through it, and he said it's a really workable building. He thinks the concrete floors that are in there today could stay, and they're.
I told you, we got to keep the whole thing.
Cool if you could, I don't know. If you could, I don't know if you can keep it all.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I'm fine.
Thanks, Commissioners.
Thank you, Brian. So that takes us to new business. Hearing none?
Yeah.
New business?
Don't have any tonight.
Really?
Yeah, no, I thought we had enough on our plate. I thought we were going to be discussing other things
Thank
further
you.
on, and I just kind of.
I'll make it quick. There's a mural that's been suggested for one of the side of one of the web blockers in Squalicum Harbor. Do you need approval from us on any of that, or can we make it, how do we make it?
No, we've been working on that. I think we'll give you an update on that maybe at the next commission meeting.
All right. I would also like to see if we can get a report on what's going on in our East County regarding a biomass conversation that we kind of been having. And if there's something that I need to do, just let me know.
Which conversation?
The biomass, the conversation about the east end of the county. And then something that's come up recently, and I've said it before, but it's about the plywood plant. And on social media, I shared a photograph I took of the old asphalt ramp down behind the plywood plant that goes into what used to be the marina in the 1930s. It's getting a lot of attention on my personal social media pages, and people really like the concept. And I definitely would like to see if we can pursue that concept. Which
We're talking about the piece of ground at the.
4 acres. Unlikely we're going to build anything out there. Can't really do much with a building. We got to run services out there. It's next to the water. In storm events, water can wash up over the top of it. So anything we do to that is going to be very expensive. If we spread the pile of gravel and dirt that's around out there, smooth it out, throw some dirt down, put in a gravel parking area, and let people use it, it's another water access point on the bay. That's, we really aren't ever gonna, I don't think, we're really never gonna be able to use that property for anything.
I thought we were in negotiations with, I thought
We have a tenant we're currently negotiating with, so let us try and wrap that up, and if that's successful, then we'll come back to you to either approve a lease or to not approve a lease.
What's it for?
Shirley?
Something?
Is the battery dead on the remote?
Geyser.
We have talked to Brent Cowden, about using that property. He has talked about using it in the fall of this year, but we're nowhere near a deal. So let me see how far I can get down the path with him, and then we'll come back and get direction from the commission.
Can we back up just a minute? Who wanted it and they want to do which?
I want it.
You want it?
I want it to be a waterfront access point for recreational purposes.
Okay, like for kayaks and stuff?
Basically, yeah.
And you're talking about where the old log dump was?
Exactly there.
Okay.
The issue that we've had this conversation over and over and over and over, the water's too shallow, it'll cost millions to dredge it, there's not gonna be any legitimate water access for vessels.
Right.
So, we can't build anything there. If you're working with a gravel operator, it's a gravel yard, okay, I guess that's an option. But I would like a permanent answer to that, because it's sitting idle and that's crazy.
So, we wouldn't need any access from the water for the Cowden group to do anything with gravel. That's just gonna be, if I'm not mistaken, a storage site or a.
It would just be for staging to go to
Staging
C
site,
Street.
correct. So possibly if that was to move forward to solve the solution you're speaking to, we could reserve a strip with the old loading ramp side into it for people to access.
Well, theoretically, I mean, one or the other, I'm just troubled that it continues to remain idle.
Right.
So, let's just
Maybe
decide
there's
to
a
do
way
something.
to do both.
Are you looking at a boat launch there,
Nope.
or are you looking
Nope.
at
No.
launching
No,
kayaks there?
Just
Hand launch.
Parking?
Make it flat, leave a gravel parking area at your own risk. Throw a boat in if you want. You can hide behind the old breakwater there that used to be the pier or sort of thing you'd walk across to get to your boats. But no expensive improvements. Just put it to use. Right now, it's not really off limits, but, and I know people use it already, but it's not really accessible either. Anyway, just want to throw that out there. That's it.
Okay, nothing else? Nothing else?
Don't have anything?
Nope. We stand adjourned.